is it fair to have Super Bowl expectations for a team like the San Francisco 49ers with an inexperienced quarterback like Trey Lance?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you for tuning in today, folks.
And people keep asking this question, and I keep explaining it to you the same way.
Don't raise your voice at me.
And you guys act like it's just unfathomable to have this outlook. And I keep coming back to the same thing. Super Bowl aspirations. That means getting to the Super Bowl, possibly winning it. You're playing in the weakest NFC I can remember. I said repeatedly, if the Niners were in the AFC, I would not have the same Super Bowl aspirations. There's too many good teams in the AFC. The gauntlet is too tough to take a guy like Trey Lance and just say, hey, you can beat Josh Allen, you can beat Patrick Mahomes, you could beat Lamar Jackson and all these, and Herbert. You can do that and win. No, that's too tough. In the NFC, it's absolutely possible because there's not a dominant team, and there's not a team in the NFC that I look at and say the Niners can't win because they have Trey Lance at quarterback.
But I didn't ask if it was possible. I asked if it was fair.
Yeah, it's fair because the NFC's weak.
So you're telling Trey Lance, so is that a pep talk from Kyle Shanahan? Like, hey, don't worry. One, our team is really good. We'll be able to make up for your mistakes. Plus, our conference is ass. So just don't blow the games for us, and we'll have an opportunity to win in the postseason.
That's not how that conversation would go if I were Kyle Shanahan.
But I guess the point that I'm getting at is how many times does you could point out your Brad Johnsons and your Dilfers and all of these other, random once every 10-year type quarterbacks that stink, but wind up on a Super Bowl because you have one of the top defenses of the last decade on the team. I'm talking about a player who was playing in essentially their first season.
Mm-hmm.
Is there can you think of a team? Because I feel like the 49ers, it's a rather extraordinary circumstance, isn't it? A team
Absolutely.
That went to the Super Bowl, injury after injury after injury after injury. The following year really knocks you out of contention, gets you in a decent draft spot. You decide to go all in to move up and draft a quarterback. Your pieces that got you to the Super Bowl are still in place.
Mm-hmm.
You're just going to replace that piece under center at some point. That some point is this year. I can't think of a time. I don't remember, and maybe they did. I honestly don't remember. They probably did. But Patrick Mahomes is probably the only the guy who stepped in and was like, no, we expect to be a Super Bowl caliber team this year.
The two that come to mind are Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. And we talked about it. And Lamar,
go ahead. I'll let you finish.
I think a Super Bowl contender.
But Lamar didn't start.
No,
Lamar came in when Joe Flacco burned the house down.
Right. I'm talking about the next year.
Okay.
The following year.
Okay.
Remember, that was Lamar's rookie year when he came in for Joe Flacco.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm talking about the next season. I think he had about a handful of starts that rookie year. And
I mean, I think it was more than it was like 6. I think he won
five or six.
Yeah, I mean, to get them, he got them to the playoffs.
Right. Trey had 2 or 3 starts last year. So it's not a direct correlation, but it's in the same ballpark.
Okay. It's fair. That's good.
And the biggest one is probably Patrick Mahomes. Like that's the closest one.
Well, that's been the eternal comparison.
Right.
Alex Smith is Jimmy Garoppolo and Patrick Mahomes is Trey Lance.
Right. Now, the reason why there aren't a lot of comparisons, and to be honest with you, it feels like that might be the only one, is because of the team around them. You just don't see this often. You don't see a team with a roster that's supposed to be as top-notch as the 49ers having a rookie come in and play, or a second-year guy come in and play, or have the rookie be on the team. They let him sit for the whole year, and then they give him the reins the second year. You just don't see that. So typically when people talk about like, oh, rookies aren't going to the Super Bowl, like when does it ever happen? You're right. That's because they usually play for the Jets.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that.
Yeah.
That's a huge reason why it never happens.
And then you're traded in 2 years.
Right. So yeah, the rookies don't typically do that because they're usually on bad teams. Trey isn't a rookie anymore. He's a second-year guy, but still, like, he's in a unique situation.
And that's what, like, Trey's the weight on Trey Lance's shoulders is so much greater than that on Justin Fields. Or I know he's not playing Zach Wilson, or even Mac Jones, like because of the caliber of team. I mean, Mac Jones might be the closest, but because of the caliber of team that the San Francisco 49ers are, and I think it's amplified because Jimmy Garoppolo is still on the roster, which is a weird dynamic to the whole thing. I mean, it was weird for Baltimore. You got Joe Flacco there on the bench. Joe Flacco, he was just on the bench. Like, he was hurt. He had been healthy for a week. Oh, you couldn't win a game when he was starting, but there was a call for him to replace Lamar Jackson going into the playoff game, despite the fact Lamar Jackson had won all of those regular season games to actually get Baltimore to the playoffs. There's a weird dynamic when that veteran familiar with the team is just sitting there. Like, hey, what's happening? I'm here. I'll have me.
So it's a unique situation. And one, to be honest with you, that, like I said, if people have other examples, please let me know, because I was trying to think and I couldn't think of anything other than Patrick, and maybe I kind of reached for Lamar. You know what I mean? Those are only two that off the top of my head are comparable. So if you want to go by that history, then yes, it's completely fair to say Trey, like, because if you're going by that scenario, a second-year guy going to a Super Bowl ready roster, they usually do pretty damn good. They get to the playoffs and they do pretty good. If you want to go by that history, if you just want to say a young quarterback in general, obviously the odds are. No,
but that wasn't the question. The question wasn't about a young quarterback. The question was about a young quarterback on a Super Bowl caliber team.
Then they typically do good. Pretty, unless I'm missing times.
No,
they do good almost all the time.
I can't. The thing is, the sample size probably isn't very large because it's an extreme circumstance. That was Patrick Mahomes' second year, right? And then, you know, Lamar's circumstance was a lot different than Patrick Mahomes and what Trey Lance was, in that he had to start. You know, roughly halfway through the season, and that gave him quite a bit of experience headed into the second year that he had. So no, it's fair to cut it off there. I can't think of any more, but that was the question. The question was the expectations on the Super Bowl team. Now, I think it poses another question about the 49ers. We look at the depth of we look at the roster, and we know what's there. We talk about Nick Bosa. We talk about George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, all these different things. God knows we love Kyle Shanahan. That was a very liberal use of the word "we," by the way. But like they worked to get they worked to get to the playoffs. Like, it was 6-7 straight games that they had to win, or 6-1, or. You know, they had to win a whole lot more games than they lost down that final stretch of the season. It was more than 6 games. What was it? 3-5 is what their record was. So the final
7 of their, they went 7-2 in the last 9 games.
So you had to have an extraordinary finish. You were playing in playoff games moving forward. And did that fool us into something, that thinking that the 49ers maybe they're not that?
I don't
like
think
we
so.
saw a sample size last year of a 3-5 team and a 7-2 team.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think what they showed at the end in the second half of the season is more indicative of who they are. Like, that because only thing that happened was because coming into the season, we thought they had a really good roster. We thought the team was good. They started off 2-0, then they ended up losing 4 of their next 5. And it was a bunch of different things. It wasn't personnel related. Like, there was some injuries. The secondary was in question. I kept talking about how they kept losing a turn. They kept turning the ball over and kept issues with penalties. Right?
Sounds familiar.
And once they cleaned that up, then they were able to win games. Like, so it's not a personnel issue. It was an execution issue last year. And I think that's more the case so far in week one. In week one, it wasn't more so about the personnel. It was the lack of execution. And yeah, I think it's the same story. Same story this year. One thing I will say, and I wanted to touch on a little bit, we could ask Eric Crocker about it. But and this is my guy. This is my guy. It's not shade or anything like that.
Oh, here comes some shade.
I expect more from Deebo Samuel. I didn't think he played well in that game. And specifically, like when you talk about running and stuff like that, I mean, that happens. I talked about how people are anticipating the run when he's in the backfield, whatever the case may be. But in a situation to score, you got to hold on to that football. And it wasn't even, I know it's tough conditions and all this other stuff, but man, I need Deebo to hold on to that. I think he had a couple of drops too. I need more. Fair or unfair, and I'm not doing this, but you're in a different light now. After everything that was stirred up in this offseason, it's not cute little rookie contract Deebo no more. You made some demands, you created some stir. All right, the lights are on you now. I need you to perform like what you expected to be paid than what you ultimately were paid. So I need Deebo, and I do anticipate and expect him to play better than what he did in week one. I don't think that's what we're going to see from Deebo all year or too much at all anymore for the rest of the season.
It's kind of the curse of having just played one game.
Right.
We're reacting to it because it's all we can react to. But if we're being fair, and this isn't about wins or losses, this is about individual assessments. I think it's difficult to assess much that came out of that game, given the conditions. I think it's difficult. I don't disagree with everything that you just said about Deebo, but I'm also not going to be too hard on him. I'm not going to be too hard on any player in that game. I think the one that I'm most frustrated with, quite honestly, is Kyle Shanahan. And I pointed this out. I think it was during the commercial break. If I'm repeating myself on the radio show, my sincerest apologies. But you nailed this 2 years ago. You said Kyle Shanahan is really good when his game plan is put in play and nothing messes it up. If he could just execute his game plan as laid out, no variables change, no pieces change. Like he is a master at that. But if you throw one wrench in there that changes things up, it feels like it completely falls apart. That wrench on Sunday was the loss of Elijah Mitchell. It felt like their running game died when Elijah Mitchell left. And a lot of that I hold at the feet of Kyle Shanahan. We know you're a running team. We know you're a running coach. We know that's your thing. How were you not prepared for this? Given your running backs always get hurt. Like, how could you not have guessed this? So I think if there's one person I'm going to put the blame on, and even that, it's still a little bit limited, I'm going to put a lot of it on Kyle. I don't think penalties are a condition of the weather, though.
No, I don't think so either. I also, and you'll put it on Kyle, I'm going to the defense. I expect the defense. Defense gave up 19 unanswered. I mean, against the Bears.
No argument.
They're better than that. That defense is better than that. And they've been hyped up by myself and others all off season. And you give up 19 unanswered in the second half to the Chicago Bears. It's unacceptable. They should have won that game.